NFL preview as we get ready for a big Week 15. I am joined by not Fast Eddie Fear, but it is Chris Spags. I am not Chris Spags. I am, of course, your old pal Emac. Little snafu there with the artwork this morning, but no worries. We're here, we're live, and I am now going to hand the control tower over to the one and only Chris Spags, since this is your show and I am but the guest for my first NFL debut.
I'm so used to doing the opening spiel. I'm not used to how to handle the reply to it. But yes, we are here. It's Sunday. Josh is vacationing, and part of his things was supposed to get everything set up, but we did not get an overlay as part of that process. Josh, too excitable of a boy to go see T.I. and have the run of the Home Alone Hotel in New York on Osmos and Dimes. But we are here. Got a lot of NFL stuff. Got a lot of weird ownership. I guess maybe not weird, but a lot of ownership on a game that's kind of bad. So that's fun. Let's talk about it up front with Joe Mixon. But first, let's talk about Thrive Fantasy. Thrive Fantasy is a new DFS app where players build a lineup, builds of prop bets of only top-tier athletes. You pick 10 prop bets out of the 20, and the less probable a prop is to occur, the more points it's worth. Therein lies the game theory. They have an NFL contest going on right now. If you click this link we're dropping in the YouTube chat, you can get $10 on any $10 deposit, a $20 on any $100 deposit, or $50 for a deposit of $200 or more. Today, their prop bet du jour is on Joe Mixon, who is projected to be the highest owned player on all the DFS sites today. Over under 74.5 rushing yards, EMAC. What would you do with Joe Mixon at that number?
That's a good question. I think that's pretty solid. We're hoping he gets in the end zone from a fantasy purpose, and one of the reasons that we're very, very high on him, particularly on DraftKings, is where he is underpriced. But we always have to step back and remember why we like somebody when we're looking at the Thrive contest, because it's just the raw numbers. I'm going to go over on it, but I think his outcome is somewhere in the 80 to 85 yards for rushing.
Yeah, I'm also going to go over, and we'll talk more about Joe Mixon. EMAC, one thing you're going to have to do today is fill in for Josh, because we do a weekly pick where we pick a guy to hit 100 yards, and I'm currently down 2 on Josh, and conveniently enough, Josh is missing one of the weeks that would be a tiebreaker. So so you're filling in for him, and your pick counts for him, and we will hit those at 12:30 Eastern. But
is that wide receiver, or is it?
I'm going Joe Mixon.
Is it wide receiver, running back, or anybody for 100 yards?
It's anybody. They just have to hit 100 yards in one category, either receiving or rushing.
Okay. Excellent. I will be prepared.
I like Mixon a lot. I think Mixon's a very strong play today. I worry a little bit, though. Like, I'm actually above the field. He's at 40% projected ownership right now on our ownership projections at Osmo.com on DK. Are you with the field, over the field? How are you feeling about Mixon?
I have him in my cash game lineup, and I ran a bunch out there this week. So he is there along with Dalvin Cook on DK just because of where they were. I also went with Jalen Samuels. Normally, I would try to get a Saquon Barkley in there or Elliott, but with the way pricing worked out, I liked those guys' values. The odd thing is, though, I had so much extra cash left over, I ended up going with Thielen, and I don't know that I feel comfortable with that, but I didn't want to leave like $2,000 on the table.
Yeah, for cash, I think Thielen seems like a play. I think for tournaments, I'd probably go to Antonio Brown. I'm intrigued by him at that price point. Juju, a lot of positive vibes for him, but also a lot of ownership. Antonio Brown's for, I think, got a fractional amount. Actually, did he go down in our recent update? Antonio Brown, we have at 14%, and Juju is at 22%. So I like Juju. I worry a little bit, though, about Antonio Brown being the guy who's been there for so long and Juju being the toy that Belichick takes away. I don't know. What are you doing with the Juju Antonio Brown conundrum?
I don't have a lot. Where I'm sort of hand building, I've been leaning towards Juju, and then I went back and made a couple Brown teams, and I only have one team where they are both on it in some of the high dollar stuff, because I felt that I don't know that they'll both have a good game, so I didn't want to double up on them, because I think Big Ben tends to spread things around a lot. We know he's dealing with a cracked rib, and Jalen Samuels is lurking, Vance McDonald, Jesse James, and he doesn't really play favorites per se. I think on the flip side, they're going to be throwing a ton, and I think that Brown is going to get the more catches, but I like Juju for the score. So I did answer your question. I'm splitting them, and I don't feel positive about either one, and I wish Ben wasn't hurt. But that's where
I agree with that. I questioned how hurt Ben was. I think there's a lot of cover up there with how they handled that game last week, with just assuming that they didn't need to put him back in. and that Josh Dobbs could take care of things, and then they blew the game and brought him back. I don't know. That seemed like a very bad Mike Tomlin decision where they didn't take an opponent seriously and it bit him. Ben at home as an underdog seems like a nice thing. I definitely played some Ben. I think the question for me is really, is Juju capable of doing it again? The air yards are there. The targets are there. They really haven't been for Antonio Brown. It does seem like maybe Antonio Brown's the number 2. And again, Belichick does take away the favorite toy. So I think it could open things up for Brown and for the guys you mentioned, Vance McDonald. We assume Jalen Samuels will be starting. So there's some interesting plays there. But I assume you feel like you have to have exposure to this game, even though on DK it's not that appealing of a priced matchup.
Yeah, and so with regards to on the Patriots side, it seems like I'm mostly going Brady, and he's actually my cash game quarterback, and then I've got Edelman, and that's where I've stopped. I barely have any Gronk, if I have any at all, and I tempered my expectations because now that they have all the running backs in the mix, why not go to James Devlin? It's one of those, thanks Belichick, appreciate what you're doing there. So I'm staying away from that side. So where I'm doing a game stack of that's the one team where I do have Juju and Brown, and then I've got Brady and Edelman on the other side.
Yeah, I didn't go to Brady this week. Some of his blitz numbers have worried me. We've talked about it on the Contrary show a few times with Evan Silva and Osimo. And I think, Brady coming off of a big game, his price is very reasonable. I mean, he's $100 more than Josh Allen, I think, which is just kind of insulting to everybody involved, really. Both our intelligence and Tom Brady's legacy. But, the blitz does worry me a little bit. I think Edelman is a fine play. I think Gronk is a better play than people are giving credit for, but he's also got ownership because he had that big game versus the Dolphins last week. I don't know. I feel like this game could be a little trappy, but the total's been going up and there's going to be points from somewhere. But I think you're right. It could be hard to pinpoint it. And James Devlin could easily have 2 touchdowns and just it's worthless then to have any Patriots.
I think he has 3 carries this year. He's got like 40 career carries over 6 or 7 years. He has 3 carries for 3 touchdowns.
Got to give that guy the ball. He's a home run hitter. Just get him out there.
Goodness.
Where are you going on then if you're not going as much to the Pats Steelers game? Obviously, that's the highest total game on the slate. A lot of middling totals across the board, but where are you finding yourself the most that game-wise?
I have a lot of Kirk Cousins, and one of the things that I found interesting is we all know the Ben Roethlisberger home road splits, but it was on Twitter from both from some DFS people and some regular NFL reporters how bad that Cousins has, 1, been on primetime, and 2, against difficult opponents. Now, oftentimes on primetime, that's going to go hand in hand because they try to pick the more interesting and intriguing matchups, but it was markedly just bad, and then he just beats the hell up out of these lesser teams. So I'm going with him, and I've actually gone as far as to play Cook, Cousins, Diggs, Thielen, bringing it back with Stills. And I probably have that on about 10% of my tournament teams.
A lot of Vikings. I do like the Vikings this week. I didn't play as much Cousins as I thought I would like going because I had so much Cook, and the Dolphins give up a ton of yards, so I think it's credible to play. 4 seems like a lot, and I think running it back with Stills, I did it a couple times. I played a lot of Stills last week, which I was obviously happy with. This week, I worry a little bit about the matchup with Rhodes on the other side and just the Vikings being a better defense. We saw what they did versus Seattle. I think I don't know if we would agree on this. I think is a better offense than Miami's. So I think to me, that's where I kind of shook out with it is I have a lot of Cook, but not a lot of the other Vikings because I just don't know that Dolphins can keep up in a letdown spot.
Yeah, that's a favorable thing. I did most of my stuff on full point PPR, so that's where I feel a little bit more comfortable going with that many players. From the Vikings, if it was the half point PPR, I would probably drop Thielen would be my guess, and just go with the Cooks, Cousins, and Diggs.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know that I have enough Cousins today, but I agree. Like I think he doesn't love the bright lights right now, which is if they do get into the playoffs somehow by some grace of God, then I think that'll be something to keep in mind there. But I agree. The spot versus Miami off the radar, not a national game. I think it's a pretty good get well spot. The coordinator changeover should help. I think the assumption is it's going to benefit Dalvin Cook, but when you help the run game out as much as they've needed help, and Dalvin Cook has looked good, he just hasn't kind of gotten enough running touches. It feels like. It's going to open things up for the passing game. And if anything, I feel like it might be more of a Diggs game, and nobody's really talking about Diggs. Because run game opens up play action, and Diggs is more the play action guy.
Indeed.
What else?
What do you think about that, the late game? I know it's not on all of the sites, but it's an intriguing one there with the Rams taking on the Philadelphia Eagles, and we have a quarterback change there. Oh my God, they're going to the backup quarterback. We got to take the Rams defense, but wait, that backup quarterback's the reigning Super Bowl MVP. So that's going to be a fun one to watch this evening. I do like that one for the showdown slate. Hey, there's a free article on the Osmo.com homepage that breaks that down for the single game slates. So check that out. In that one, I really like Gurley, and I'm playing a lot of Ertz, where I have the full all-day Sunday contests.
Yeah, I'm not playing any slates today, which one we cannot plug, but there is one that is discussed at length on the Osmo homepage. But of course, it's a conflicting sponsorship thing. But you should go check the Osmo homepage out and see the other big tournament that people are talking about this week. I'm not playing any slates with that because I didn't feel like I just didn't get the time to deposit on another site. But I think that matchup's interesting. I think it's a pretty good get well spot for Jared Goff. People really worried about him last week, but it was in the cold and it was versus the toughest defense in the league. Now he gets this Eagles secondary who just Dak shredded with Amari Cooper. I think it could be a big Brandon Cooks game. Gurley getting back on track. I think you want all those Rams. I'm not sure about the Eagles though. I think people are going to play Foles like he's just going to return to form. And this Eagles coaching staff is not the same as last year, and I think that's really the bigger issue for them. And I don't think they can remedy Foles quite as much. So I'd be less inclined to play Eagles, but I don't know. Are you playing Eagles today?
Just Ertz is the only one I have, and then on the showdown slate, I'll of course by default I'll have some more. But my thought was, if anybody does well, I expect it to be him. I know he's going to have the focus of the defense on him. And Foles, as you mentioned, the one concern is he hasn't played really since week 2. So I'm worried about just a little bit of rust. I mean, Wentz has taken the first team snaps, getting all the reps, etc. Even though Foles has experience, remember he didn't really come on the scene until last year. So he's kicked around with the. I was looking at his stats. He had 1 year with the Rams. I forgot he played in Kansas City for a season as well. I had totally forgot that one.
Well, but played, you could use that term loosely.
Played. He took the field for 3 games, I think it was. But so that's my fear, is just that, hey, he's a backup and everything. He caught lightning in a bottle for the last four weeks of the season last year. So my fear is, as you said, I don't know that he's going to return to that form. So I'm just going with Ertz.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of smoke and mirrors with that playoff run last year, which they were capable of pulling off because they had really great minds in that coaching staff, who are now gone elsewhere to do better things or get fired if you're John DeFilippo. But overall, to me, I would say that that's sort of my concern with Foles, is that I don't think I don't think Doug Peterson has done enough with Carson Wentz, who's a better quarterback. So I don't see how he's going to have this sort of remedying effect on Nick Foles in that offense. But I think he could still have value. I think Ertz is a smart play. Golden Tate, the amount of targets and air yards. Maybe even Alshon Jeffrey, because Nick does like to sling it a little more. Wentz has been a little less aggressive this year. But I wouldn't load up on Eagles, I think would be my approach there. People talking about the Bills running backs in the chat right now on YouTube. And again, we are watching both the YouTube chat and the premium Slack. So if you want to get your questions answered, hit the premium Slack NFL channel, tag me in there. We'll get to them. And use the promo code Live Before Lock if you want to get in that premium Slack, get 1 week free. Or you can get all the ownership projections or article from Osmo today, which I did not have time to read, but I'm sure is brilliant because he's one of the better minds in football DFS. So go check that out now. Promo code Live Before Lock. What do you do with the Bills? Are you playing any Bills this week, EMAC?
I am. So here's the interesting thing. So Josh Allen was someone that I like a ton. And he's got some discounted receivers that you can pair with him. There are actually 3 of them. Zay Jones, sorry, I'm blanking on Foster, who is kind of come on. He was hurt in college, came on as a huge high school recruit, and then sort of disappeared and didn't win his job back after he came back from injury. But a lot of depth on those squads. So he's someone that's fully healthy. His target, snaps, everything has been trending up the last couple of weeks. They outright released Kelvin Benjamin, so Foster was a big part of that. And then McKenzie is another guy that's sitting there, and I really like him on the full point PPR because working out of the slot going against Detroit is something that I think, particularly with no running game, with Mark Murphy being the running back, I hesitate with that. So everything to me points to Allen. Here's the one concerning thing, and I saw it pop up on a couple different articles I was looking at this morning. The Detroit Lions are allowing something like 2 yards per rush to opposing quarterbacks, and so that's got some people second guessing themselves. I decided my where I came down on that is I'm not as worried about it because Allen has had 3 straight games of nearly 100 yards rushing or better. So he is the outlier that I think can cause Detroit problems. Could he have a bad game rushing and maybe get 50 to 70 yards, especially with no running backs? Sure, but I'll take it at his price for tournaments.
Yeah, I like Josh Allen too, and I've liked him the last 2 weeks. So I think that probably clouds my judgment a little bit with it because it's been a really good experience owning him in the last 2 weeks. His ownership just hasn't really been there. This week the ownership is climbing up; it's getting closer to 10%. I think a lot of people have figured out that if he's not a good quarterback, he is a compelling fantasy quarterback because he turns every play into a run and he throws it 50 yards downfield and very little in between. I think it's an interesting spot for him, especially with the running backs out. I agree too. The running QB yards against Detroit don't really matter because it's not the same thing. Like you're not talking about a quarterback who's going into a drop back. You're talking about like a lot of design runs or a lot of quarterbacks who aren't intended to run, who are starting to break runs against Detroit. I think the issue to me is just that you don't have a true running back. Isaiah McKenzie could take some handoffs. Mark Murphy, I don't know why I call him Mark Murphy. Marcus Murphy.
Oh, sorry.
His full name.
Mark Murphy. Back to was it an old Redskin player or old Green Bay Packer or something? Mark Murphy. There you
go. The Packers owner, who actually I know the son of as Mark Murphy. And his son is Brian Murphy, and he is a degenerate but a lovely boy. Very. But yeah, no, they're an interesting team, which I'm curious to see how this shakes out because this could be a great Josh Allen day. Like this could be the Josh Allen day of all Josh Allen days, or this could be him just getting hammered and this game being 10-3 at the end of it all. Which wide receiver would you play out of the 3 with Foster, Jones, and McKenzie?
I rank them Foster, McKenzie, and then Jones. They're all near minimum or lower priced across most of the sites that I was making lineups on today. I like putting one with him. So I've made like 3 different sets of teams, each one having one of his receivers and then similar players. I'm not bringing it back with anybody on Detroit, though, which I kind of found interesting. But I just don't see a lot of dynamic play coming from Detroit in this one, and Stafford's dinged up, etc. Not really a great running game. Who knows what they're going to do with the passing game? So it's more of a one-sided game stack, and I don't generally do that. I like to get something on both sides, and I like to do the 4 and sometimes even the 5-man stacks. But this is one of the cases this week because some of the games were rather unappealing when using Fantasy Cruncher and creating my groups. With some quarterbacks, I said I only want 2 players from this game with them. Some I said 3, and then some I went with my normal 4. But normally I'm almost always 4, so you can get quarterback, probably 2 of his teammates, and then 2 guys from the other side of these higher totaled games. But this one, it was more individual team totals that were higher rather than game totals outside of Pittsburgh and New England.
Yeah, I think you could run it back with Zach Zenner. I think he's the only one. Fantasy Cruncher definitely pushes him on you if you use their default projections. I was a little bit surprised how much Zach Zenner came up before I kind of tweaked things. But yeah, in Galladay, I don't see it versus Tre'Davious White. I don't think that's sort of the spot you want to go to either. So you could maybe play Ellington, but I agree. Like I only have Bills, and I think actually I played more Bills on slot, like including the defense, not including a bunch of Bills, but because I think Detroit's just shiftless, and now you get Stafford out in the cold, injured, versus a Bills team who's played high energy, even though they have nothing to play for. They are playing like a team who is still competitive, still fighting. Probably bodes well for their future. Jay Kelly 13 asking, do you think Detroit will use their common sense to stack the box and force Allen to throw? It's possible, but I still think that actually could be a benefit to Allen. I don't think he's going to want to target Zay Jones a lot going against Darius Slay, but Robert Foster getting targeted 27 yards downfield, I think that's very much a possibility if they do try to limit the run. And then the second he hits one of those, you can't stack the box anymore. So I think Detroit's in a tough spot defensively.
Yeah, I see some of the guys in chat are saying Bills line's ugly game. Why are we looking at Bills? Essentially the price, because you can get a solid quarterback, and I don't mind playing him by himself. And you got the cheap receivers that we know are going to be in the mix today because of the lack of a running game. So if these guys were priced higher, I probably wouldn't be doing it. But because I can do a little stack of Allen and 1 or 2 of his receivers, and then I can bring in the big guns. at other positions, which has been really nice. So that's you got to look at the whole board. You got to see all the moves and future moves before you
Yeah.
just say,
And,
"Oh,
and also just look at recent results enough where Josh Allen, since he's returned from injury, has been, I mean, if people have been playing him enough to win Millionaire Makers, but he's been like a good enough quarterback to win you those tournaments. He doesn't fit, like Emax said, he doesn't fit the traditional lineup construction because you want to run it back, you want to stack accordingly. But I think a quarterback who is at the price of other quarterbacks who are going to be highly played. If Tom Brady struggles, and you have Josh Allen at 5,800 putting up 25, which he's just been doing pretty as steady as can be. It's not a bad spot to be at all. Let's see what other games what are we doing overall with Oakland and Cincinnati? We talked about Joe Mixon up top, but people are stacking this game. People think this game might become a shootout. How are you feeling about it?
when I was building my crunches, I saw it bring in about 10% Cincy and 10% Carr. So I have that's about my exposure. Plus, I have Mixon on my cash team, so I felt that was enough. The Raiders, it's kind of hard to pinpoint who's going to do what. You got to like the muscle hamster a little bit, but I ended up with some Jordy Nelson and some of their other sketchy receivers, which those teams generally had Boyd and Mixon and Carr. I went and looked at him because I thought, what the hell is going on? Why is Jordy Nelson appearing in my life today? So that's is more of a splash, and that's just in low dollar stuff. I relatively went away from that game and from the New England Pittsburgh game in the tournaments, and I'm hoping that provides enough differentiation for what I'm doing, because I think those will be by far the two most popular games. And I found enough players elsewhere, particularly with Kirk Cousins in that Minnesota game, and Josh Allen himself. So this is a unique week. We haven't seen one quite like this in a while, particularly with the 6 games, 12 teams that were on the primetime slate or Saturday, etc. That gave us the 11, or 5 teams that gave us the 11 game main slate. It was just interesting. It's the word I'm stuck on.
I went the other way, and also just to talk about ownership real fast. The Minnesota game, or the Minnesota side rather, is much more highly owned than the Oakland side. Obviously, they're better players, so I have no issue with that. But I think Derek Carr is an interesting play. He's been playing well the last few weeks. Cincinnati's giving up the most yards in the league, and it's only gone up. They're not one of those teams who's gotten a little better. Like I think the Lions, their yards just come down a little bit. The Bengals have not. They've gone up, actually. They're giving up 422 yards per game. Derek Carr has been slinging it. So I think Jared Cook is one of my favorite. I mean, it actually is by far my favorite tight end play on the board. But I think stacking Carr and even maybe onslaughting the Raiders with some Bengals, either Mixon, or if you want to get cute, Mixon and Boyd, I think are interesting. And that's a good way to get away from the Mixon chalk and also theoretically get some of the upside if there are points coming from Mixon. Carr to me is just at 5,400 on DK, like, and under 5% ownership. I'm surprised he hasn't gone up more, because he's been, I hate to say he's been good, again, at least good enough. Let's talk about, let's see, actually, what game would you think? We talked about your Minnesota boys. Where else are you going today, EMAC, that people might not be going?
Oh, that is a fantastic question. I had more. Tennessee. Marcus Mariota, and I think you can go to Corey Davis, who's quite talented, and Tywan Taylor, who is near minimum on a lot of the sites here. And my kind of running back that's off the board that I've played in a few tournaments is Derrick Henry. Sorry, getting my Henrys confused there. But it was interesting. He didn't check in very well on Osmo's grades, but in the article that's on the main page there, wink, wink, nod, nod, I broke down why you have to consider the grades, but then how you build your team. You can't always get top shelf players at every position. So my thoughts here on Henry is he's kind of in the sweet spot for pricing. He's not the high end guy, and he's not the discount guy. Yes, he's coming off 4 touchdowns on that Island game where all eyes were on him, but people aren't talking about him a lot. I suspect. What do we have for his ownership?
For Henry, we have him at 7% on DK.
Okay,
right
that's beautiful. I think that's a good spot. Is he going to get 4 touchdowns this week? No, he's not. Could he get 2? Yes. And I was a big proponent of Dion Lewis earlier this season, but he sort of has fallen off. Mariota's healthy now, and if you go back and look at Henry over each of his 3 seasons, including this year, towards the end of the season, he's been just a bulldozer and getting some good touchdown numbers, more so than he does at the beginning of the season. So probably reading too much into that there, but all signs pointed for me to go here as a contrarian play, and I feel comfortable with it. And now I thought he'd get up to maybe 10 or 12%, and he still could, but 7 is, wow, that means people are overlooking him, and I think that's fine. Now, when you play him, you need Ezekiel Elliott to not have a good game. You need Saquon Barkley to not have a good game. Jalen Samuels can't go for 20 points, etc. So if a couple of those things happen, or Dalvin Cook doesn't do very well, or Mixon doesn't do very well, you can gain on the teams that have those running backs. You don't need all of them to fail. But Ben Rasa always says this on his shows. He says he doesn't like moves where you have to get it right twice. In that, I need Henry to have a good game, and then I need everybody else to fail. That makes it difficult. I don't need everybody else to fail. I just need a couple people to not have their point per dollar. And I think there's a decent chance some of them will.
Interesting. Yeah, I agree. I'm actually a little surprised too that Henry didn't get more ownership, because people see that box still, like that box score, and it was one of the biggest games in Thursday Night Football history, one of the biggest games in the league this year, obviously. I'm surprised more people don't go to him, and I think you're right to go there. I think it's such a hard act to follow up on, and I prefer that Mixon Cook tier of guys, and Samuels to a certain degree. I agree with you though. Like, I'm not crazy about Elliott and Barkley. Barkley in particular, I'm actually a little bit worried about in this matchup, to the point where I don't have much of him at all. The Titans defense is just really good. And one thing I've been trying to look at more, which has been sort of informative, teams that are really good in the red zone, I feel like are better at bottling up players just in various ways. And Tennessee's had some backslides. They're the best red zone team in the league by far this year. I mean, maybe not by far, but by enough where it's noticeable. Giving up just 4 points per red zone visit, scores or touchdowns on only 44%. So they're able to constrict when they have to. I think when you take Odell out of there, I think you could see Barkley just have to face a lot of fronts that he's not ready for, and just good tackling, which I think is one thing that Tennessee's done well. It worries me a little bit about Barkley in that spot. And same thing for the Colts and Ezekiel Elliott. They've been really covering running backs well. Zeke can get the ball in different ways. Same thing for Barkley. So it's hard for me to judge. But I think if ever there were a case to fade the 2 running backs above 9K on DraftKings, I think this is the week to do that and go with that mid-tier and just try to just get 20, 25 points out of the Mixon Cook of the world. Let's see, any good questions here? People talking about weather in the chat. How do you handle weather, Emat? Because it's sort of thing that I feel like Alex has said before, Osmo has said, is that if it's not above 10 to 15 mile per hour winds, it's not worth worrying about. Are you avoiding any of these rain games or anything like that?
No, I'm actually not. I didn't really let that concern me. For Baltimore, I mean, I've got some Lamar Jackson by himself. And I really am not coming back with anybody on Tampa Bay, because I think it won't be the nice weather games, and Winston doesn't quite look right, and they're just kind of a mess going against fantastic defense. So that one kind of solved itself. Tennessee and the Giants, I'm okay with. I know it's kind of a mess up there, but we have Mariota. He doesn't live and die by the long ball. Everything is short, and we know he does have running upside. He just hasn't really demonstrated it this year for his variety of injuries. So that one sort of took care of itself. Shepard's the only guy for the Giants at this point with Odell Beckham out, but I have him a little bit, particularly on DraftKings, where I think he's 4,400, and he did not make my final cash game lineup, but he was in my placeholder lineup. I'm okay with Saquon Barkley, but I don't think you need a ton of guys on this. And where I'm doing the game stack with Mariota, and then one of his receivers, either Tywan Taylor or Corey Davis with a little bit of Henry in there, I'm only bringing it back with Saquon Barkley. So it's sort of limiting itself, and I think those are I think, believe, are the 2 worst weather games that we have. So.
Is Shepard I'm comfortable with, because he's not getting targeted very deep downfield. He's going to be in the slot. He's getting just 9 air yards per target, so he's going to be close. A guy like Tywan Taylor, I could see wanting to downgrade him a little bit, because he's been getting a ton of air yards, getting hit downfield more, and that's been his main value. So I think somebody had asked, would you go, hold on, in the premium Slack, somebody had asked if we would go Taylor or Robert Foster. I think I'd be more inclined to go Robert Foster, just because I think his role is more secure, and I think the Bills will need to throw to Foster, whereas Taylor, I don't think you need to throw to them in this matchup. I feel like they're going to stymie the Giants enough where they don't need to put up big targets downfield. I think if anything, it's more of a Corey Davis day to me, but I'm not playing a ton of him either. Let's see. People talking about San Francisco's weather. What are you doing with that Niners Seahawks game? The only other game besides Pittsburgh and New England in that late slate.
So I'm good with Dante Pettis. He should play today. His targets and everything has been trending up well for him. He was injured for the beginning part of the season, and a lot of people don't realize how dynamic he is as a playmaker. He was at the University of Washington for 4 years, my alma mater, so I got to watch a lot of games with him on the telly, of course. But he is the all-time career punt return leader in NCAA history, which is pretty impressive. I think he's like 8 or 9, something in that range. And when you can get him in space, he is a great jitterbug kind of player, and he has a ton of speed. He and John Ross were on the teams together, which is partly why the Huskies have not been so good this year offensively. But those guys were both so fast, but they get so dinged up. So we haven't really seen. Ross was even better than Pettis, in my opinion, and he's just been hurt all year. But I like, looping back, I do like Pettis. I'm okay with Kittle. And then I think Chris Carson is intriguing. Rashad Penny is out today, so it's going to be Carson and Davis in the backfield. So I like Carson there because we've seen Seattle, run on almost half their plays, and they run the most in the league.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on Carson. I think he's an interesting play, and I think people undersell the fact that he does get involved in the passing game sometimes. I think people are going to assume Mike Davis will pick up more of a role. Also, Penny wasn't even getting that targeted that much in the passing game anyway. But Carson can be, and I think Carson's a very strong play. Guy I like in that game too, who I don't think anybody ever talks about, but he's been good for me a couple times this year. I don't know that I want to call myself a whisperer on him. David Moore is just getting a ton of air yards per game, and I think I like him more in games where Baldwin is active because I think that attention that you have to pay to Baldwin opens things up downfield for him more. No pun intended. But I think David Moore is a really strong play today at 4,300 on DK. He could get you 0, so I wouldn't go with a ton of him, but he's a guy to me who I think jumps out as somebody who could get a ton of air yards, could catch 2 of them, and then all of a sudden you have a 110-yard 2-touchdown game from David Moore at no money at all. And also anybody who was playing Wilson or whatever is kind of just stuck because then they don't need much more than that to beat San Francisco probably.
Who is your tight end today, or tight end group? Because I haven't really spent up. We know that T.Y. Hilton is active. I think that's fine for Eric Ebron, but he's getting pretty expensive. Kittle feels like he's priced up too much on DK. I'm not really enthralled with Gronk, so I'm crossing all these guys off. I've ended up with a fair amount of Vernon Davis and Vance McDonald. Vernon Davis gets the boost because Jordan Reed is out. I believe he has a toe injury of some sort, and Davis has surprisingly looked good, and he has about the same level of efficiency as Reed has had on way less plays. So if you look at the two of them side by side, you're like, hey, wait a second, this is Vernon Davis, and you're like, I remember him, with the Niners, and then with Denver, and he's been with Washington for like 3 years now. He still has some amazing speed for a tight end. His hands, always questionable, but he should get, I think, 4 to 5 catches today, and that's where I'm just said, you know what, I'm going to go with him. What do we have him for his popularity?
Let's see, Vernon Davis we have at 7.1%. I thought I would have more of him, and I like him as a downfield target. I just worry about, I don't know that Josh Johnson is as ready for prime time as he looked last week. That Madden training that he did can only get you so ready for the Giants. But I think the Jags come out and can do some things against him. The total, too, is just so bad where I didn't really get much deeper on Vernon Davis and Josh Johnson. But I think Davis is a fine play. I have a ton of Cook, which I said. I have a ton of Ebron. I basically went in that 5,900 and slightly below price range. A good amount of Gronk as well. To me, I think people are going to try to pay down for like the Anthony Firkser of the world and Davis's, and I don't know that that's the move because I think all of those other tight ends have like 20-point upside, and those other guys, the cheaper guys, have 10 to 15. And I feel like on a slate like this, that could be the difference. But I think your approach is valid. Let's see. Actually, let's do the 100-yard pick. We didn't do that.
Oh.
And you have to pick for Josh, as we mentioned above. EMAC is picking for Josh this week because Josh, like a coward, is taking the weekend off to enjoy Osmo's spoils in New York for the live final for FanDuel. But we have a 100-yard competition going on. Josh is currently in the lead by 2, so we need every week to count. And for me, I'm going to go with the chalk running back. I'm going to go with Joe Mixon for my 100-yard guy. How about you, EMAC? Who would you pick to get 100?
Oh, I would love to, because it's Josh, pick Josh Allen and hope he gets there rushing, but we're not
or receiving. It could be either.
We're not gonna do that to him. I guess I can't pick Robbie Anderson since he's played. I am going with. Let's go for a big play guy. I'm gonna go with Corey Davis.
Oh, okay. He's not been picked by Josh this year. Josh has been picking Juju for the last 2 out of 3 weeks, and that's been working well for him. So I think he deserves a ride on Corey Davis after Juju's success.
All right. Well, I thought you had to pick somebody a little more off the board than.
No. Old Josh just takes a high price. No, we just do whatever. I tend to choose some weird guys. We've settled on something. It's not like home run picks where I don't know if you follow that at all, because I think you weren't on board with us for part of that, but we were doing home run picks every day. And it was like, well, don't pick Stanton. Don't pick like these super obvious guys, but I think just take who you can take. It's hard enough to figure this out anyway. Just take
there really are no guarantees. And Davis, I think I've got him projected for like 70 yards, so he needs to get the big one. But it's possible. He's dynamic enough. The Giants are dinged up in the secondary, even though they've actually been playing okay. They traded away some of their key guys to New Orleans and their nose tackle and stuff like that. So I'm okay with Davis, even knowing I could have had.
I have some Corey Davis. I forced him in because I thought he actually graded out pretty well for me, and nobody's on him. Under 6% ownership right now in DK.
Yeah, the one hard part is if you start looking at Mariota's totals, you're like, where are all these yards going to come from to support his receiving cast? But you have to remember he was hurt for so long. Couldn't feel his arm because of that elbow injury. That's bad when you're a quarterback and you can't feel your hand or the ball. That seems to me that's suboptimal, as they say.
Yeah, I would agree. Watch Anthony Ferkser have just a 100-yard 2 touchdowns.
Because if you can't play a third string tight end, come on, what can you do?
I don't mind him. I wish I'd play a little more of him instead of just going heavy on those guys in that same price range. But we make the choices we make, and then especially when we do a live show, we cannot change those choices. Just gotta ride with them. Let's see. Questions about Big Ben in the chat. He's hurt? You mentioned that earlier, EMAC. You were concerned about his rib pain. Is that a reason to fade him? Do you think that potential rib injury in a game where he's an underdog at home?
So I think he'll be, okay at the start. He's probably got a little medical assistance that he won't be feeling his ribs. But if he takes one big hit, that could be a problem. So we're going to mention our buddy Jazzraz, Ben Raza again. We got that show on Friday that's kind of fun. We're doing some sports wagering stuff Friday afternoon. So if you guys want to check that out, it's pretty good. But he's one of those guys that he likes to bet on unders, because in his thinking on this is there are a lot of things that can go sideways in games, keep people getting hurt, etc. So he tries to find a spot where he can go in some of those games. So that's kind of how I'm approaching the New England-Pittsburgh game. Could it be a 35-31? Absolutely. These are some phenomenal teams. You got 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks and Hall of Fame receiver in the game, and some good coaches. Well, one great coach and one coach that's seemingly taking steps backward in Pittsburgh. But would it shock you if Roethlisberger missed half the game? And if that is a reasonable outcome, then I think that's how you can say, well, then I don't want to play as much of him. So tough call, but that's where I am on that.
We talked about it up top, and just for anybody who's tuning in now, I think that injury thing was very specious. I think they were just holding him out because they thought they were going to get the win. I think the one thing going for Pittsburgh today, if you do think Ben was super hurt and he might be affected today, Patriots don't sack anybody. They're not going to get pressure. 4.6% sack rate, which is one of the worst ones on the slate. And the Steelers have actually been pretty good, despite Ben's kind of mythology of just getting hit a lot and staying in the pocket and still making throws. He's only been sacked on 3.2% of dropbacks, which is also pretty low. So you're talking about, a limited sample size of pressure on him. I think that could bang him up like that. So I think if you are playing Ben, and I'm playing, I think I'm with the field on Ben for the most part, maybe slightly above. I'm comfortable with that. I think the thing you're looking at more is him at home, him being an underdog. I think him, having Juju out there, who's just been a monster, putting up over 100-yard games, and then Antonio Brown seemingly just waiting back for a moment where he's actually going to get the targets to do the same. I think it's a good spot for Ben, and if people are afraid of his injury, even better.
Yep. Here's a good question in chat from Bruce Jr. He's saying, would we go with Cooks, Carson, Henry, or Adrian Peterson? So I actually like them in that order that he has them there. I've Cooks is in my cash game lineup, and I remembered I needed to build my Millie Maker team, so I have Carson as my running back there for some differentiation. But those are the guys I like best of that quartet.
So we said Cook, right? Not Cook. Brandon Cooks on this.
Yes, sorry, Dalvin Cook.
Okay, it's like just making sure I got my too many cooks in my lineup.
Well, hey, at least we're not Ernie Grunfeld and messing up the Brooks.
It's something about that Ook thing. Brookses and Crookses. They just screw up everything. I'm honestly, I was sitting in bed listening to like what I'll usually do, or I just get woken up somehow at like 6 a.m. and I sit in bed like, go back to sleep, you fucking assholes, go back to sleep. And I put on the Bringers NFL podcast. There's one of the ones I listen to with Michael Lombardi, who's a former GM, and they have their host guy on there, Tate, who's pretty good. And there's going to be so many people playing Dalvin Cook, and it worries me because Dalvin Cook has been hurt so many times. He's not even seeing a ton of volume. He's getting more volume, but he's not seeing a ton. I'm really worried about Cook. Like, I'm playing a ton of him. I'm not going to back down off of that. But I do feel like he's the chalk guy who I'm officially worried about today. And I don't know if that's justified or not, because we talked about all the things with the Vikings. It's a great matchup versus Miami. It's a letdown spot for them. They beat their arch rivals. It's a lot of things moving for Minnesota, but Cook could hurt that hamstring after one play, and I will be very, very mad. I will throw my phone. That's how much Cook I have.
I will probably join you with that if that happens. So, that is a risk. There's in-game injury on any play for any player, but you are right. He is a little more prone. I just the potential for dump off passes and Latavius Murray being essentially out of the picture from a snap count, etc. And with the Vikings still, I think they still have a slight chance to make the playoffs. By the end of this week, we'll see a mishmash of teams that are still alive, but they need like 4 teams to do something specific in week 16 and 17 for them to make it, but they still kind of have a chance there. So I expect all hands on deck.
The Peterson part of things of that running back thing, I don't see quite as much. I know Jacksonville just got shredded by Derrick Henry, but I don't think there's not a quarterback that you could trust back there, which I guess you could say about Mariota. At least he's a threat to throw it deep, and they were throwing it deep to Taylor. What is Josh Johnson going to do? I don't think he's going to do enough to keep pressure off of Peterson. And then you also have Chris Thompson back, who hasn't been used quite as much as you might think, but I don't see it for Peterson. I like that people want to go back there. That's so cheap. I think that's a good move, but there's so many running backs. Like, why go to Peterson? You go to cheaper guys. You go to the Richards of the world, or you go pay up for the Mixons and Cooks, and you can sweat the Dalvin Cook's health like we are. Peterson is not a dude I'd want to go to. What about Fournette?
Excellent question. I ended up with a lot of him on a certain site that's running a really big contest today, paired with the Jags defense. The pricing was very nice for both of them. I don't think I will be alone on that. Fournette's one of those guys that you worry about a little bit because he is another guy that seems to get dinged up or have in-game injuries. He has missed them, over half the season with various maladies, but I like the situation. Washington is an absolute tire fire within a dumpster fire, and that's
they've given up. Something. I mean, I think it's safe to say that game last week proved they've given up.
It was just awful what they're even doing. I mean, good God, Mr. Butt fumble, and now Josh Johnson. Daniel Schneider should just go out and play quarterback. It's about effective as they're doing, because there's a couple guys out there that I'm surprised they didn't take a chance on to fill in at quarterback, and I'm not talking about Tim Tebow, but Yeah, they picked up Reuben Foster. Come on, guys. You know, whatever.
A little bit of sleep at the wheel.
Yeah, the Schadenfreude. I delight in being out here in the DC area and just watching every year people talk themselves into Washington being a great team, and every year they melt down at various points. So
Yeah, no, I agree. And I actually think Josh Johnson would intrigue me a little at following up that game. Like I liked what I saw from him. Like I thought the pass to Crowder looked good. I thought he did some okay things, even though he didn't look super comfortable back there. You could have talked me into like if they were Washington Atlanta this week, I'd be like, yep, Josh Johnson. Like I'll give him a shot at 43 or 4,100, 4,300. Yeah, 4,300.
yep.
Versus Jacksonville, who just got embarrassed. And now they're at home, and it seems like a spot where they should just come at them and maybe get some turnovers, which they have not gotten at all this year. I just don't see it for Josh Johnson, and by default, the Redskins offense has to go down with him. But if Josh Johnson throws for 300 yards today, I think that'll be the cap run.
That's when cats and dogs are living together, complete insanity.
Like
who's going to catch the ball? Crowder? No, he's a short guy, and he busted that long touchdown. Doxson? No, he's just never putting it all together. Then they've got a mess of practice squad guys. Vernon Davis, Chris Thompson is probably the one player I like the best from an opportunity standpoint. I have a lot of Davis because he's cheap, but anyway, they're just kind of a mess. Questions that two guys we didn't touch on: Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup. Yep. Do you have the air yards handy for Gallup? I remember reading something that said he has some like very high number, and he hasn't been catching them, or something was called.
He's been over 100, I think, for like the last 4 weeks in terms of air yards, and last week he caught 25, I think, or so. I don't have the full in front of me, but yeah, he's getting the most air yards by. I've actually played Gallup every week for the past few weeks, kind of waiting for that breakout game. The closest one was the one versus the Saints, where he was almost in the end zone and then just got lightly tackled at the 5 and didn't get in. But he's close. So people asked about Dak too. We talked about it on the contrary yesterday. It's not a great matchup versus Dak because the Colts play a zone defense, and Dak is actually substantially appreciably worse versus zones than man coverage so far since they've traded for Amari Cooper. Small sample size, so that could change. But the Colts keep everything in front of them, and Cooper is getting a lot of those longer plays where even if he's got a guy in front of him, he's getting it batted off that guy's hand and catching it and running it in. I don't see that happening today for Cooper, but I think it could happen for Gallup because the attention that they have to pay to Cooper and to Zeke in the flat, I think is going to maybe differentiate a little bit or direct some of that attention there. And Gallup could get one over the top. So I would be more intrigued by Gallup, and I'm playing Gallup and I'm not playing Amari.
I actually went and built 20 teams where I had Dak and Gallup, and I put them in the ticket contests over there on DraftKings, which are kind of fun. They're very top heavy. It's almost like winner take all. Because there's usually only, you play in the quarter of the dollar and only 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 tickets, depending on the size of the ticket are there. If it's the $3 or $4, the Christmas contest, etc. But I won, I think, 14 tickets yesterday, just screwing around, doing that on $5 in the quarter contest. So I'm trying to do that again today. So that was my outlier play. When you're in those, you don't want to put, I'm just going to put my cash team in this, or I'm just going to do this. You have to go exactly away from what the masses are doing, because it's the Ricky Bobby. It's all or nothing. And now all of a sudden I've got 5 tickets into the NBA Christmas contest. I won a couple to some MMA thing, and I don't even do MMA. And I won some for hockey, and I won some for some other the Basketball World Championship. So all of a sudden, I turned that $5 into, it was over a dozen tickets, but they're worth almost $100. I was adding it up. I'm like, whoa, how did that happen? And I was playing just the showdown slate, where I said, okay, Robbie Anderson, all in, here we go. And it worked out. That doesn't always happen, but, $5 into nearly 100. Now I got to monetize those tickets, but
yeah, good luck on that part.
Yeah.
You got the first stage done. It's like the underpants gnomes in South Park. You got stage 1, you figured it out. Stage 2, question mark. Stage 3, profit.
Yeah.
What about the Ravens? We talked about them briefly, but the Ravens and I guess the Ravens offense too. They have one of the better team totals on the slate, which kind of baffles me, but it's against the Bucks. I don't know. What, you have any Ravens at all?
Lamar Jackson and the Ravens defense. That's it. I don't feel the need to pair anybody with Jackson. I don't know what's going to happen with Kenneth Dixon. I want no part of Gus DeBus because he gets, about one target every 3 games. And Dixon is finally healthy. Remember, he got hurt at, I think it was the end of training camp or in that first week. But, now Javorius Allen's out of the picture. Collins is who knows what's going to happen with him. So I think they're going to give Dixon a look because I want to see what they have. And but I don't know what he's going to do in this one, and his quarterback isn't going to do him any favors. So those Jackson and the defense was the only way I went there.
Yeah, I have a little bit of Dixon. I don't think he's a terrible play, and I don't think I have any John Brown. I've had John Brown stacked with Lamar Jackson, I think, every week since Lamar Jackson took over. That has not paid off, even though the air yards have been there some weeks and it's been nothing. Might have one Snead, but yeah, I think Dixon's a little interesting just because of the price and the fact that if he does get more work, he 10 touches last week. If he gets to 15, I think that could be very profitable versus the Bucks. One guy I do have some Ravens defense, not as much as I thought I would have because they're one of the chalkier defenses by far this week. I have a little bit of Chris Godwin on the other side. He got 130 air yards last week, did nothing with him, but he's still the same price as he was that people played him at. I faded him last week, but I think the attention they're going to pay to Mike Evans, they've been bracketing number one receivers pretty much across the board, which did a good job on Julio, but it should open opportunity for Godwin, at least theoretically. So I'm a little bit intrigued by Godwin, not a ton, but he's only at 3% ownership. And, people were playing him 2 weeks ago. Fade the matchup and play him. Maybe.
Yeah. I don't like it. If this was in Tampa Bay, I would side with you. But for this one, I'm going away from it. I see someone asking, did we forget about Edelman? Edelman and Brady are actually on my main slate cash team. I only have Samuels as my other Pittsburgh guy. So that's normally I don't usually go with kind of like a little game stack like that, but it is the highest scoring game. And I felt those guys had the best prices. And with regards to the passing attack, could you envision a sustained drive where Brady hits Edelman 4 or 5 times, and all of a sudden at the end of it, he's got 4 or 5 catches, 50 yards, and you're like, holy cow, he's in double digits already. And if that happens, in the first or second quarter, you got a potential, if he gets in the end zone, you're looking at close to 20 fantasy points. You got to tell little stories of how your players can get there, because one of the things which is what makes me nervous about having Thielen on this same team, but I had so much money left over, I ended up with him. But Thielen, if you look at him, he doesn't get the yardage. He gets peppered with targets, but some of them are 3 and 4 yard catches. And that doesn't add up very quickly when you've got a guy that's, the most expensive wide receiver I think he was the most expensive on DK. He was $100 more than Antonio Brown. So, the question is, should I have gone with Antonio Brown instead of him, etc.? Ultimately, I'm counting on Cousins to throw to him, but that makes me nervous. Yeah, he's the target leader, the reception leader, or top 3 in all of these, top 8 in touchdowns, etc. So, he's one hell of a player and having a great season. But if you look at his recent game logs, a little bit scary for the price point.
Yeah, and I'm with you too on Edelman. I think Edelman is a guy who I have a ton of this week. He's my favorite Patriot, but he's everybody's favorite Patriot. He's the highest owned Patriot too. So,
what's the percentage on
that? Where did he go? He is, I think, a percent. I don't have it in front of me right now.
I've got it. He's our 4th highest at 20.5 on DK.
Yeah, so there you go. Yeah, he's very highly owned. So you're not very cute with Edelman there, but I think he's a perfectly good play. And I agree too. As the playoffs get closer, I think Edelman becomes a better play. Matchup like this too, we'll see a lot of linebackers covering him. I think that's where you want Edelman to be. So I have no problem with that. One game we didn't touch on, which actually we probably should have, because I think it's an interesting one. Green Bay and the Bears. I think this is an interesting game. I don't know. I thought I was going to play more Rodgers than I did. Because I did like what I saw with the Packers last week versus the Falcons. They seemed like they had a little more bounce in their step and they were playing happily, which I think has not been the case with a lot of the Mike McCarthy stuff. But I think Devontae Adams is interesting. And I think running it back, perhaps the Chicago offense is a play that nobody's going to do. And this game could be a high scoring one. The defense too could be in for a letdown. It's not as cold for the Packers like it was for the Rams. Any interest at all in this Green Bay Chicago game, Emac?
I have some Trubisky. And I have some Cohen, and that's the Bears side of the game stack. And I think most of it's coming back with Adams. And then I think that was one of the games where I said if you play a quarterback, only play 3 players with him. So I purposefully went in when I built that particular iteration, and I locked Cohen and I locked Trubisky. Because it kept coming up. So here's a fun thing to do with, and I don't see any news coming up or anything crazy as we're approaching lock here. So you guys upload your stuff. You've got about 60 seconds left before everything locks for the first game. So deep breath now. But what I'd like to do on Fantasy Cruncher is run like 100 lineups. And I set the quarterbacks to 15%, so it picks a bunch of them. And then I go look and see what are the quarterbacks that are popping up that I wouldn't normally expect to be there. And it was Trubisky. And he was checking in every time I did different settings or tweaked different things. He was hitting that cap, and Brady was getting to like 11, and Roethlisberger was right around where Brady was, and Cousins was just a tick below him. So I said, you know what, there must be something to this. Let me go look and see what I can do with this game. So then I said, okay, I'm going to build 20 lineups. And that's where I lock in the quarterback, lock in the one player I want, and then let it fill out the rest. That's what I also mentioned that earlier with Dak and Michael Gallup. So it's hard to tweak it and get it if you're trying to do 100 at once. But if you say, okay, I'm going to take this chunk and build it out this particular way, then you can just go put it in your contest. So.
Yeah, I think that does make sense. And well, it's too late now. But one game that I did like a little bit that people were asking about at the end there. I'm a little intrigued by the Cardinals and the Falcons, but I'm an idiot. I've been an idiot for the Cardinals all year because they throw a ton. They just don't accomplish anything. But they had 3 guys like over or around 100 air yards last week, and David Johnson got 10 targets and didn't do much with them, but he still got 10 targets. I think that Arizona back is interesting. Well, we'll know shortly if it is or not. But that Atlanta D is so bad, and it's a terrible team total for the Cardinals, but if this is the Josh Rosen week, I've liked Josh Rosen for too many weeks this year, and he's been terrible every time. But he's at 4,700 versus a team giving up 400 yards a game. Could be Josh Rosen week.
He's the Rosen one. It's ordained. He has to have a good game at some point, right?
Hopefully. Give him one good game before the end of the year. All the other rookies are doing stuff. Like he's a UCLA guy, and I'm a USC guy, so I'm not even predisposed to supporting him, but I think he's got an arm. He should be able to do something. He just shouldn't be as bad as he's been.
This is what week 17 is for.
That's true. So let's go, Josh Rosen. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you to Thrive for presenting the show. We do appreciate it. Thank you guys for supporting us in a million different ways. Make sure to like this video. Leave a comment telling us, I don't know, what Josh Rosen's stat line for the day, what your prediction on that is, and you'll be entered to win in our 24 days of giveaways. We're giving away 1 month free to any sport of your choosing or any item of merch from our new store at shop.awesemo.com. So leave that comment on the static version of the video the second we hop off with Josh Rosen's stat line, and you'll be entered to win not only that, but a year-long all-access pass to all of our premium offerings at awesemo.com, which we're giving away on Christmas Eve. That's $700 in value coming back to you. So go ahead, like the video, leave a comment. You can do this on any of the videos we have. You'll be entered to win. All the entries pooled together, and we pick at random at the end. So keep doing it. Keep doing it. Keep doing it. Any parting words, Emac?
Good luck, gamers.
Good luck, luck to everybody who's playing Dalvin Cook. Stay healthy, Dalvin. We're rooting for you.